Hey, how's it going, captains? Admiral Tori here, and welcome aboard for another World of Warships video on my channel. In today's video, I want to discuss my thoughts on the upcoming HMS Hood and the Kaga, because these two ships has pretty much stirred up a lot of different opinions, and I'm sure you guys are curious on my take on these two ships. Now keep in mind, this is coming from a observation view rather than play the ship because I didn't have access to the ship. So, let's start off with the Hood because more people know about the Hood compared to the Kaga. Now, I think that a lot of players got the misinterpretation of the Hood because the Hood is one of the most famous Royal Navy ships in the 20th century. If you go on Google and you type in HMS, the first suggested name is HMS Hood. Now, she's famous because of what happened during the Battle of the Denmark Strait. At the same time, she was famous due to the fact that she was the last class of battle cruisers. And people are not hitting the historical significance of the Hood here. Now, when I say historical significance, I'm not meaning that you should buy the ship because she was famous for the battles, but understanding why the Hood is in this game, because the overall opinion about the Hood is not so great. Now, there are a few people who defended the Hood, and I would say majority, like at least 60%, say that the Hood is just not what they expected. And it's just due to the fact that the Hood is famous, and some people just don't know why the Hood is famous. They hear the name, but they don't know where the Hood is coming from. So to make sure that we're on the same boat here, sailing the same sea, I'm going to give you guys a little background story here. Now, in the early 20th century, early 1900s, before World War I, the world has hit a pinnacle point in civilization. Mankind has figured out a way to harness the power of the engine. Technology is being developed pretty fast and rapidly, and it was because we're in a period of time where it was known as the Industrial Revolution, imperialism, and people are just arming themselves with the best weapons with the introduction of the machine gun, the Gatling gun, accurate rifles, and due to the fact that we're able to harness the power of engine, which is very significant, it allows human beings to build cranes to lift heavy metal. And with that heavy metal, we can put together a ship. And this ship is called HMS Dreadnought, released by the Royal Navy. This spawned the era of the Dreadnought design battleships. This is like the first battleships. Now, we did have somewhat a battleship before the Dreadnought. It wasn't referred as a battleship. We called them pre-Dreadnoughts, but they were somewhat similar to a Dreadnought battleship. The reason why the Dreadnought was so revolutionary was that mankind has achieved the power to push a heavy ship forward and has the power to rotate these big guns. This was not possible in the 1800s because engine wasn't powerful enough. Now, remember, in the 1900s, we had the airplanes because we utilized the engine. We had cars, which started to become a luxurious thing to own, but it still was somewhat unreliable. So it got to the point where the Royal Navy understand that engine can be harnessed, and they decided to put in a ship. So a Dreadnought design battleship like the USS Texas, the Fuso, is around the concept of having big guns, thick armor, large ship. And the only reason we were able to achieve that is because of the engine. The engine is rotating that gun, it provides power to move the ship. Now, although the engine is doing all of this stuff, these ships were still slow. The average speed of these ships is 18 to 23 knots, and if you can get to 26 knots, like the Queen Elizabeth class battleship, that is considered a very fast battleship at the time. So, yeah, it was revolutionary, and you gotta think about it. Just because you have big gun doesn't always mean that it's going to be usable. Another technological advancement for the early 1900s is electricity. We were powering the world. We were throwing away our candles and we were moving forward to electricity. With the power of electricity, that allows us to develop fire control system, early computers, and, well, when I say early computers, I'm not meaning like literally the computers that we see with digital computers. We're talking about analog computers, utilizing electricity to rotate things. I don't know, whatever the case is, we're just basically experimenting with these new weapons. And what great way to experiment with these new weapons with great superpower is World War I. And it's been proven with the machine guns and the rifles, we got it more accurate basically, because with the fire control system and all this stuff, we have developed a very powerful ship. Now, as almighty as the Dreadnought design was, there was a flaw with these ships. And when it comes to warfare, you gotta think about it. It's very crucial that strategy will prevail in most cases. If you hear the story about the 300 Spartans who fought the Persians, they were outnumbered like 1 to 10. I don't know the exact ratio, but I can certainly tell you that it's such a famous, legendary story that it lives up to this day, and there is like an absurd Hollywood version of it. But the reason why those 300 Spartans were able to fight the Persian, not because they were well trained, well, they are well trained, that is certainly true, but the point is that they're being outnumbered, so theoretically they should have lost as soon as possible, but they were able to fight them because of strategy. They forced the Persian into a one-on-one situation in a very narrow cannon. So with their more well-skilled, your skilled men, they can kill like, I don't know how many Spartans each Spartan can kill, probably 110, I don't know, 30 Persian per one Spartan. Basically, they were smart enough to not be surrounded by the Persians. The Persians were smart enough to figure out that these Spartans will do better than them when it comes to one-on-one situation, which the Spartans were genius at. So when we moved all the way to the modern day, you have slow battleships, you have cruisers, you have frigates. The best way to beat your enemy is strategy. And due to the fact that you have slow machines at that time, you can't really trick your enemies or surprise them at this speed. So speed was crucial, and having big guns is always nice, but you gotta trade speed for the big guns and thick armor. This is where the Royal Navy starts to develop the concept of battle cruisers. So battle cruisers is basically more armor than a cruiser, but less armor than a battleship in order to achieve somewhat a respectable 26 to 30 knot speed. And the reason why it's so crucial to have such speed is that, say for instance, you have 3-on-3 dreadnought battle. They're engaging each other. Wouldn't it be nice to send big guns and flank the enemy around without them realizing how fast you can get to that location? Yeah, that'd be really nice. Now, the big trade-off is that these ships, although they're big, remember, these big ships need powder bags. They need propellant to launch these large shells. So due to the fact that they lack armor, they're also volatile to being hit on the armor belt, and it's going to cause a huge explosion. So that was the biggest drawback with battlecruiser. They tend to explode, and it was experienced during the Battle of the Jutlands, from what I heard. So that was the biggest drawback. Now, it was fine at that time because everyone was slow, and fire control systems weren't as brilliant as you think they would compared to World War II, because the fire control system was very crude. Okay, so you gotta get lucky with your shots. So understandably, you trade armor, you have a high chance of being detonated at that time, but that was all right because you're taking your chances against ships that have primitive fire control system. They weren't accurate, and the engagement distance wasn't that far, so that was fine. Okay, HMS Hood is a battle cruiser, and this is where people miss the historical significance of the HMS Hood. She was a battle cruiser. She was the last battle cruiser for the Royal Navy. She was built around the end of World War I and probably launched in the 1920s. So her overall technology, her overall design was outdated by the 1930s, because in the 1930s, the world has developed much more advanced engine by 2 decades of technology in terms of research, and with that ability we were able to build big ships that were able to achieve 30 knots, same speed as a battlecruiser, and yet much more heavily armored, like the Bismarck, like the Iowa, like the Yamato. Like, look at the Yamato. Yamato is such a massive ship. It weighs like 4 dreadnoughts and yet is able to achieve 28 knots speed, and that's very respectable. So battlecruiser by the 1930s was replaced by another category of battleships. These battleships are referred as fast battleships. Now, it doesn't stop people from building battlecruiser like the Dunkirk, and I think that's where people miss the interpretation of the Hood. They expect the Hood to be some kind of super battleship, although she is a battlecruiser. Now, battlecruiser is a subcategory of battleship. I will say that right now. It really is a subcategory. A lot of people will view the battlecruiser as their own class of ship, and that is true, but in reality they're inspired by battleships. The point was to put a lightly armored ship, more heavily armored compared to cruiser, with big guns and outflank the enemy. But since with fast battleships, more advanced fire control system design, better engine, you get the point. Battleships are back, okay? And these new battleships are not dreadnought battleships. These are fast battleships. So battlecruisers were outdated. And where all the negativity, all the negative comments about the Hood is really coming from the people who try to play the Hood like a battleship. You see, battlecruisers weren't designed to brawl because they didn't have the armor. They were designed to outflank to support their particular fleet. And due to the fact that Tier 7, you look at the Tier 7 battleships, the competitors like the Gneisenau, Scharnhorst, Nagato, and Colorado, those guys were designed to brawl. At the same time, they were more modernized compared to the Hood. Hood originally was supposed to be modernized in 1941, but if you knew anything about, or at least know something about World War II, Adolf Hitler decided to put his feet into Poland, and that pissed off the British because now the British want to go for a second round with the Germans. So Hood didn't get the funding or the time to modernize. And to put it into perspective, she's basically a Tier 7 stock ship. She is really a stock ship. If you've seen the stock Fuso, the stock Amagi, the stock Kongo, if you play those ships in the early days, back in the days, that is basically the Hood. She doesn't even have a big superstructure. She was never modernized. And people's expectation, because of how famous she is, expected her to be very powerful. And the truth is that she is one of the largest ships ever been built by the Royal Navy. She displays 45,000 tonnage, which is why she's so large. To put in perspective, the Bismarck displays 50,000 tonnage, which is why they brought the Hood to the Bismarck battle. But then again, the point is that Hood was not modernized. Hood is vulnerable to newer ships. So something like the Gneisenau, which had better armor than the Hood, and yet still able to achieve similar speed to the Hood. You see the point here? The Gneisenau was built in the 1930s. She gets the luxury of having new engines that are more efficient than the Hood. Now, I'm not saying that the Hood was never modernized with the engine. She was modernized, but she wasn't modernized to a point like in 1941. She was still somewhat outclassed. And like I said, battlecruisers is something that of the past, okay? So, if you try to play the Hood like a battleship, the Hood is not going to do what you want. And people demanding that Wargaming buff the Hood to be somewhat a super ship really puts the Hood into a really awkward position where the Hood wasn't really designed to be powerful. Don't get me wrong, the Hood is somewhat weak in certain points I want to point out in this game. The three things I want to point out is, why is her guns weaker than the Warspite? Warspite has a 2.0 Sigma value, and the Warspite also has a better penetration from what I heard. Now, the Hood has a 1.8 Sigma, which makes her more inaccurate. At the same time, the only benefit that you play on the Hood compared to Warspite is that the Hood has a faster turret traverse speed. Turret traverse speed is something that people don't like, and if you ever play the Warspite and you just hate slow turrets, don't play the Warspite. Just don't play. I save you the time. But it doesn't mean that the ship is bad. If you learn to play the Warspite is considered a very powerful ship. And it's one of those things where you can't recommend a ship to anyone because of how difficult the ship is and the way the ship is in the game due to historical significance. Now, if Wargaming tries too hard, like they did with the Nikolai, somehow the Nikolai Tier 4 ship that was not really a famous battleship magically has 12 guns, big guns, with a 2.0 Sigma value, better Sigma value than the American triple gun setup in Tier 8. Wargaming, don't try too hard, okay? This ship, I believe that the Hood, if I were to buff the Hood, buff the Sigma value, and buff the penetration to make it similar to Warspite. If you look at her competitors like the Nagato and Colorado, they have 406mm guns on the Colorado, 410 on the Nagato. They have 2.0 Sigma value, and they have a faster turret traverse speed with longer range. Hood, 381mm guns, so smaller guns, less penetration, less damage, and inaccurate compared to those two competitors. It would only make sense to give the Hood a 2.0 Sigma value. She was not designed to brawl, so if you're going to be engaging at a distance, it would be really nice to have the accuracy. She lacked the firepower to her competitors. Now, I'm not expecting Hood to be buffed to a point where she compete against the Gneisenau and these other Tier 7 battleship. The truth is the truth, guys. It's Gneisenau, Scharnhorst, they're a newer battleship. Nagato and Colorado, they were modernized to be designed as an effective ship at their time. Hood just did not get the chance to be modernized. Now, does that say that the Hood is an awful ship? No, definitely not. I don't think the Hood is an awful ship. You guys remember when the Dunkirk came out and people were just saying bad things about the Dunkirk, saying that Dunkirk's awful? It's because people didn't really give the Dunkirk time, didn't get the chance to learn the ship. And it's the tendency for most of us to want things that work our way. Okay, we are conservative people. If I buy something, I expect it to work this way, and people just miss the shot on the Dunkirk, just absolute miss. They play the Dunkirk like the Bayern, like the New Mexico, like the Fuso. The Dunkirk is a battle cruiser. Those ships I listed, they are battleship, dreadnought design battleship. The way you play these ships are completely different. You see, a lot of people value armor and firepower, and if you value that much of it, Dunkirk isn't effective. People will say that the Dunkirk was a awful ship because she wasn't really a ship that you can compete when it comes to going against Fuso. She just will be outclassed by the volume of fire. Now, if you look at the dreadnoughts, okay, you look at the tier 6, Bayern, Fuso, New Mexico, and the upcoming ship possibly is going to be a dreadnought from the Royal Navy. They're very slow. They're 20 to 25 knots. Dunkirk, more modern, 1930s, she is pretty fast. She can achieve 30 knots with the speed flag, I believe. If you value speed more than armor and firepower, the Dunkirk is actually a really good ship. When I got the Dunkirk, I knew I was going to get myself into a position where I wouldn't like her firepower or her armor. And in terms of armor, I didn't like her armor. But I value speed a lot. What wins you the game? Objective or killing the entire enemy team? Objective, killing the entire team. Which is easier? Holding objective or trying to kill somebody who's wiggling left and right and angling? Well, Dunkirk, she can get from point A to point B pretty fast in one game, even to point C and back to point B. Fuso, New Mexico, and Bayern, yes, they have the firepower. They can beat the Dunkirk when it comes to one-on-one situation. But in most cases, once you get to flag C, you're gonna spend the 80% of the game just to get to flag B in most cases. So these ships aren't really effective when it comes to maneuvering and supporting your team when your team needs the firepower. Now, don't get me wrong, the Dunkirk guns are pretty nice. They have one of the best penetration value because of the shell velocity. But the point is that Dunkirk will do better job against the Fuso, Bayern, and was it New Mexico when it comes to trying to achieve a objective. It's the truth. If the one thing you're good at is just killing, then obviously the Bayern, Fuso, and New Mexico is better. But when I see people were trying to force these battleship concept on the Dunkirk, it was painful to watch because that is not the point of the Dunkirk. You're supposed to maneuver, you're not supposed to stay stationary because your armor is going to suffer. It's just going to suffer. But if you take advantage, if you exploit the thing about the Dunkirk, if you exploit the speed, you outmaneuver your enemy, you try to support your friendly destroyers by taking out cruisers, which the Dunkirk does very well with, and the Dunkirk is extremely effective. So when I saw people were forcing the fights with the Hood when she's a battle cruiser, she's such a large ship, I kind of smacked my head on the table saying that she's a battle cruiser. She isn't modernized. You can't really expect her to be a powerful ship. Now, this is where it goes to the concept of values, and I talk about this all the time. The world doesn't think the same as you. If I like cars, someone else in the world will not like cars. They view cars different. They view cars as a means of transportation. Me, I see a nice Mercedes. I want that Mercedes, although I can do the same thing what the Mercedes can do with a cheap car, which is transportation. Why do I like Mercedes? Why should I spend money for a Mercedes? Well, I just like cars. I just like the concept of cars. I like to drive them. I like the feel of them. I don't just drive cars for transportation. Sometimes I just enjoy driving cars. That's my view. Well, someone else would say that that's stupid. Cars are designed for transportation. And that's true, but you can use them as hobbies. So in this case, if you're a person who's looking for a powerful ship like the Belfast, the Hood isn't your choice. Definitely isn't your choice. But for someone who just wants to try something different, something that's, out there, everyone has different purposes. Like if you're an Englishman, there's a good chance you will buy the Hood because of how significant she is when it comes to the Royal Navy. Historical significance, 3 out of 1,419 men, if I recall correctly, survived the Hood battle. It is a big impact. It's like the English version of the Arizona. It was such a horrific incident for the Royal Navy. It has really caused the Royal Navy to send a lot of ships to sink the Bismarck ever since this battle. So the Hood has a huge significance, and yes, people are throwing these dark humor jokes, but the point is, people don't have to think the same way as you. And I don't know why people are in the comment section trying to prove a point. It's like, oh, this guy said the Hood is good, and this guy said it's bad, so he's wrong. Or when this guy said it's bad, it's really bad. it comes down to you, okay? When it comes to people's opinion, nobody's right. Nobody's ever right, as long as there's a clash of opinions, okay? The only one who's right is you, because you're the one who's deciding. Why are you letting someone decide on whether you should buy the hood or not? So you should, grab a piece of paper and start listing what you want. I want a powerful ship. I want a ship that's fun. I don't want to be frustrated every game or having difficult time playing the ship. Hood isn't for you. Cross that out. I want a ship that's unique. I want a challenge. And I'm a big fan of history, and I'm also English. An Englishman. Buy the hood. It really comes down to people's perspective. I didn't buy the Dunkirk because I expected it to be powerful. I wanted a different experience, and eventually after, a couple months later, I learned to play the Dunkirk, and the next thing you know, my Dunkirk win rate is 60%, even though people said that the Dunkirk was an awful ship at initial release. Was because people didn't learn to adapt the way the Dunkirk should be played. You don't play a ship the way you expect it to play because every ship is the same. Every ship is unique, and that's what makes wargaming so special, because they're able to achieve different types of playstyle. Royal Navy, light armor, but have smoke. Japanese, 203s, HE all the way. Americans, AA, and their big guns. I mean, there's a variety of things you can do in this game, and the hood is one of those options. So my perspective, my take on the hood, I think she's a fine ship. She might need some fine tuning. The other two things I wish the hood also have, aside from the guns, is that she should get a better repair party and damage control like the Warspite. Mainly the repair party, because from what I heard, the hood burns pretty easily. It's the same problem with the Warspite. The Warspite, one fire can take a quarter of the Warspite health away, which is why she has a ridiculous heal at tier 6 to make up for it. So that's my personal choice when it comes to buffing the hood. Mainly the guns. Number 1 is the guns, number 2 is the heals, and the damage control. The Warspite has a carrier damage control, which is basically 5 seconds of immunity to fire and flooding, and then 60 seconds cooldown, while a battleship like the Iowa will have a 1.5 minute cooldown with a 20 seconds immunity. It really comes down to the player's choice, because one might be better than the other one in a different situation. Other one might be more preferable. So that's my take on the hood. Let's talk about the Kaga, because this is my personal. Okay, this is the personal ship for me. Okay, if you guys know me, I am a big fan of American and Japanese aircraft carrier. When it comes to World War II, Pacific aircraft carrier is a big deal, and I love it. I love these stories about how they use aircraft carriers, because aircraft carriers, a lot of people think that aircraft carriers is some kind of ship that you put planes on it. Aircraft carriers have come a long way. They have a very interesting history, and a lot of people don't know about it because they don't take the interest of carriers. Kaga is one of those ships that I really wanted for a long time. If you guys ever hear me, I do mention this several times, but for a year now, I've been waiting for a year that I wanted a Japanese carrier called the Akagi. That is probably my most favorite Japanese carrier, right next to the Kaga. Kaga and Akagi are basically sister ships. They are different in the hull design because one is a Tosa class battleship, which is the Kaga, and the other one is a Amagi class battle cruiser. But at the end of the day, they are considered sister ships because of how similar the design are, aside from the hull. They can hold similar amount of planes, and the way they look are very similar, except the islands on the opposite side of each other. So for me, I really wanted the Kaga. When I heard the Kaga was teased, I was up on my feet and I was searching fiercely on the internet for information. I looked up information faster than what I do when it comes to writing my English essay. So Kaga has a big significance to me, and I am going to buy the Kaga for sure. Now, I'm not going to buy the hood because I'm buying the Kaga. I'm going to expect both ships to be at least $40, and if I buy both ships because I really want the hood at the same time, I'm going to pay $80, which is 3/4 the price of the Missouri. And you guys know me, I don't make that much money, okay? So since I'm looking for a ship that I've been waiting for a long time, I'm going to go for the Kaga. At the same time, if you guys look at all my premium ships, I have like 80% of them battleship category. So yeah, I think it's really nice that I can get the Kaga. So let's talk about the Kaga first. In terms of balance, she's also mixed, okay? Majority would say that she is overpowered, and the reason I say that is because most people don't play carriers, they don't understand how carriers work. So here is how it is broken down here, okay, from my analysis. If the Kaga gets a tier 5 to tier 7 matchmaking, the Kaga is broken. If the Kaga doesn't face a Saipan or a air superiority ranger or Hiryu, which you rarely see, the Kaga is going to be broken because what makes her so special is her torpedo alpha damage. She has 12 torpedoes, and that is a lot of torpedoes. The twist is, she has tier 6 planes, so they're very easy to catch up, they're very easy to kill, and she has a carrier capacity, hangar capacity, of 85 planes. So it's really hard to deplete the Kaga's planes if you don't have air superiority. And that is where the problem arises with the Kaga, because people who play carriers and actually play the Kaga, they find that the Kaga is underwhelming when she gets placed against a Saipan or any air superiority carrier that knows what they're doing. At the same time, Kaga has tier 6 planes, and since she's a tier 7 plane, I mean not tier 7 plane, she's a tier 7 carrier, she's going to be placed against North Carolina's at tier 8 and tier 9 possibly. Can you imagine you're bringing a difference of 3 tiers, a weapon from 3 difference to an Iowa, like bringing tier 6 plane to Iowa? If you ever play, any carrier, that's a problem. And that's where people say the Kaga is somewhat not really that great. So if I were to fix this, I would say that fix the Saipan first, because currently the Saipan is pretty broken with the new strafe mechanic, and fix the carriers. Fix the carriers in general. This is not a problem with the ship, and this drives me nuts every 5 seconds when someone say that, oh, this ship is overpowered because it's a carrier. The problem isn't the ship here, guys. It's the system. And no matter how hard I try, my mouth isn't big enough to tell the world this, but if you don't realize how bad the carriers are, it's a problem. And people are just pointing the fingers that you play a carrier, you're overpowered. And people who complain about, playing carriers and they feel like they're underpowered, they think that they're just whining and they just want more out of carriers. If you haven't played carriers, that's the overall people's opinion. I'm not saying everyone who has never played carrier thinks this way, but our attention is directed to the ship rather than the problem with the system. If I were to fix this, I think the Kaga should be scaled like every carrier. Every carrier should be scaled by the matchmaking. It will only make sense to do this. Why? Well, at tier 5 matchmaking with Kaga, she's going to absolutely destroy the ships because these ships don't have that great of anti-air. Wouldn't it be nice that when you get a tier 5 matchmaking with a tier 7 carrier, would it be nice and more favorable and more reasonable, more rational and fair to have the Kaga's planes to be scaled at tier 5, like she plays like a tier 5 to tier 6 plane, so people in the lower tiers have a chance to face these planes. Like for instance, if I were to scale it, I might scale it by survivability, lower the survivability for the lower tier ships to shoot down the planes or make the planes slower. Whatever the case is, they should scale down for tier 5 matchmaking. Now of course, if I take this plane to a tier 7, tier 8, tier 9, that is where the Kaga is useless. And the carrier player is not having fun, and people who don't play carriers don't care. It's the truth. If it's not your concern, you don't care. But the carrier player cares. So when you get a tier 7, tier 8, tier 9 matchmaking, the planes should be scaled for those particular ships. So increase the survivability, increase the speed of the planes. Instead of your planes being shot down like it's some kind of Mariana's turkey shoot, and then it's not like a Pearl Harbor every 5 seconds at tier 5. Because apparently people, surprised that they get destroyed by Kaga at tier 5. I'm not surprised. I expected the Kaga to destroy tier 5s. At the same time, at tier 8, tier 9, I expected the Kaga to be absolutely useless against those higher tier AA ships, because although you have the volume planes, they're not going to get through a Des Moines. Well, actually, more specifically Iowa, because tier 7 won't get a Des Moines matchmaking unless you queue up with a tier 8 ship as a division mate. Then you will get a Des Moines matchmaking. Even a Magi can shoot down a lot of tier 7, tier 8 planes, okay? I know the Magi can. If you build AA on the Magi, you can do it. So even as bad as the Japanese reputation for having poor AA, the Kaga isn't overpowered. She really depends on trial and error with her hangar capacity, which is where Wargaming got the concept of tier 6 planes. So it isn't a problem with the Kaga, it's a problem with the carrier system, and people continue to direct their attention to the carriers, the specific ships. If they had the scale, like they scaled the planes, I think it would be really nice. Don't you think so? I mean, have you ever thought of this? Like if you have tier 5 matchmaking with tier 7 planes, tier 7 carrier, it should be scaled down to tier 6 to tier 5 to make it more reasonable to face those ships, so people don't feel like they're being attacked by Pearl Harbor every 5 seconds, like they're living in Pearl Harbor and being attacked by Japanese planes. And at tier 8 and 9 is not like the Japanese experience against the Americans' air superiority at late part of the war. It's just much more reasonable, guys. The number one source, the number one thing that the carrier does is planes. It really is. And the fact that the planes is problematic, that's where the problem arises. So it's not just, carrier players want their way, but at the same time, you gotta think about it. It would be really nice to scale it correctly for the right matchmaking, just for the carrier player and the players for the people who are lower tier. It's not because the lower tier players are whining about how carriers are overpowered. It really is unfair for somebody to play a tier 5 ship that has absolutely no AA and get outclassed by a tier 7, tier 6 plane. It's not fun for a carrier player to use their tier 6, tier 7 planes at a tier 9 ship. It just makes much more sense to me that they should scale the planes when it comes to matchmaking. So for me, I'm expecting the Kaga to change because there's majority of opinions saying that the Kaga is overpowered when she gets that perfect matchmaking. But I'm going to buy the Kaga no matter what. I don't care if the Kaga is underpowered or overpowered. I don't buy ships. Like I said, my values does not depend on other people's value. My thoughts isn't the same as the world's thoughts. I'm going to get that ship. And, if I smash in the tier 5 matchmaking, I feel guilty about it, but you gotta realize, everyone has the rights to play any ship. Just because you get killed by someone else doesn't mean that you cannot, say that you can't play that ship. If I put money in the ship and I've been waiting for the ship for so long, this is one of my most favorite ships of all times. And the reason I like these ships is because how cool they look and how intriguing it is to talk about carriers. In the future, I'm going to talk about the Kaga. I do a separate video about the design because, like I said, most people think that it's a ship with planes on it. That's not necessarily true. There's a lot of design concept that goes into carriers throughout the war. So yeah, that's my take. I'm going to buy the Kaga, not the Hood. Now, I did hear rumors about the Hood having a possible campaign. I'm not sure if the campaign is going to be similar to the Graz Bay where you get the ship after you finish the campaign. I also hear that the campaign might be for people who bought the Hood and they did play the campaign to unlock a unique skin for the Hood, which sucks. It would really suck. Because from my perspective, the Hood will get outclassed by the other tier 7 battleships currently. It's just, like I said in the beginning video, she's a battle cruiser. I think more people prefer the Scharnhorst, Gneisenau, Nagato, and Colorado over the Hood. Now, I'm not saying that you can't beat them with the Hood, because there are people who are skillful out there, but to an average player, you think of it as an average person, they're going to prefer those ships over the Hood. So, in terms of, being the Hood, as she is, it would make sense to offer her as a campaign reward because it's not for everyone. It's one of those ships that's not for everyone. Now, if it's something like the Belfast, it'd be stupid to make it as a campaign. Simply stupid as a marketing strategy because anyone could play the Belfast. Not everyone can play the Graz Bay because the Graz Bay requires skill. You need to aim well with the Graz Bay if you want to get some result. If you can't aim well, which most people were complaining about the Graz Bay being underpowered because of the number of guns she had, then you won't get any result. But people who know how to aim with the Graz Bay were getting the results that they wanted. So yeah, I'm looking forward to Hood being a campaign ship. Now, it doesn't mean that just because I didn't buy the Hood means that I don't want the Hood. Down the road, I do plan on getting a Hood, hopefully. Hopefully they offer it again. But I just don't have the money, guys. If I had one choice, the ship that people are talking about, the Hood, versus a carrier that I always wanted for over a year now. I remember 5 years ago in my U.S. history class that my U.S. history teacher, he's a big fanatic about the Pacific Warfare. He talks about it with the Enterprise and the Kaga and all the cool American carriers and Japanese carriers. I remember specifically talking about the Akagi and Kaga. At the time, I didn't know what the ships looked like, but when I first saw that ship, it was cool. Now, people said that she was ugly, and I think that's what makes her beautiful because I think she's one of the most beautiful carriers. And she's so distinctive, and people, when you have something distinctive, people recognize that ship. For example, the Izumo. She has 3 of her turrets facing forward, so everyone can identify the Izumo. Lexington. She's so large, she has an extremely large exhaust, the smokestack, and she floats so high above the water. She's really tall ship. That's why if you take out the name of the Lexington and you give a picture to someone who plays World of Warships, they can easily identify the Lexington. It's that easy to identify and know what the Lexington is because of how big she is. In the case of the Kaga, she's large. She has a double layer hanger. she has a high flight deck. She has that big Hinomaru, which is the Japanese sun on the flight deck that they took out on the Hiryu. She's like a dream ship that I always wanted, and hopefully you can understand the connection here for people who wanted me to get the hood. I'm sorry guys, I wanted the Kaga over the hood, and it's not because the hood is underpowered. I don't care about how powerful the ship is. Even if the Kaga was absolute garbage, if they nerf it for whatever the case it is, I will still play her. I go so far to play her in the co-op battle if it was that bad. Like if she was nerfed that bad, I'll play her in co-op battle and I will just have a blast with her. I will definitely do a video about her interesting design, and all the stuff that I could compare with other contemporary carriers. So Kaga has my money. Hood, I wish they put it into a campaign. That'd be amazing. Then I could get both ships. I will definitely do a video about the hood. I'm looking forward to getting the hood if it was a campaign ship. So aside from that, if you guys got any questions, leave it down in the comment section below. What is your opinion about the hood? What's your opinion about the Kaga? If you don't have any of, if you don't want to express your opinion, you just want to throw some random stuff down in the comment section, feel free to. But aside from that, I'll see you guys next time on World of Warships.